The sky over Earth darkened as an impossible shadow stretched across the heavens. It was no natural phenomenon, no eclipse of the moon, but something far more terrifying. A colossal warship, larger than any human city, had entered orbit, its surface covered in pulsating alien lights that sent an eerie glow down to the planet below. Moments later, every screen on Earth flickered, hijacked by an unknown transmission. The face that appeared was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, an overlord, one of the supreme rulers of the Galactic Dominion. Its deep-set crimson eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom, its elongated skull framed by armor that looked more ceremonial than practical. The voice that followed was deep and emotionless, speaking in flawless English, as if mocking humanity's belief in its own superiority. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Galactic Dominion. Your primitive civilization will surrender immediately. Resistance is futile, and defiance will lead to the total annihilation of your species. We do not make requests, we give commands. You have one planetary cycle to comply. The message ended abruptly, but its impact rippled across the world like a shockwave. Fear gripped the hearts of billions. News anchors struggled to maintain composure, leaders from every nation convened emergency meetings, and the streets filled with anxious murmurs. Some believed surrender was the only option. After all, how could Earth, with its fractured governments and untested space forces, stand against an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia? Others, however, refused to bow. The overlords had made a critical mistake. They assumed humanity would cower. In the hidden depths of a military bunker, the world's most powerful leaders gathered. Generals, scientists, and strategists sat around a massive table, illuminated only by the holographic display of the Overlord warship looming above them. The president of the Global Defense Council, a man hardened by decades of conflict, leaned forward. "They think we are weak," he said, his voice carrying the weight of human history. "They think we will kneel, but they do not understand us. We are not just a race that fights, we are a race that wins." Silence followed, but it was not hesitation. It was the calm before the storm. Then, one by one, agreements were made, orders given, and Earth's greatest secret was finally put into motion. Project Aegis. Beyond the moon, hidden in the depths of space, human ingenuity had been preparing for the inevitable. While the world believed Earth was only beginning to step into interstellar travel, the truth was far different. In secret orbital shipyards, shielded from detection by advanced stealth technology, humanity had been building its future, a fleet unlike anything the Dominion had ever encountered. Warships, sleek and deadly, equipped with experimental energy shielding and weapons that had never been tested in real combat, were now being prepped for deployment. Generals watched as the activation orders were sent. Crews scrambled to their stations, alarms blaring, engines roaring to life. Within hours, the sky above Earth would not belong to the overlords alone. Back on the alien warship, the overlords observed the planet with an air of disinterest. The humans were slow to respond, their communications filled with panic and discord. This was expected. Every primitive species they had conquered had gone through the same process: denial, fear, and ultimately, surrender. One overlord, taller and more imposing than the rest, turned to his advisors. "Prepare the fleet," he commanded. "If they do not comply, we will make an example of them." A chorus of acknowledgments followed, and the Dominion fleet, hidden just beyond Earth's solar system, began its final approach. But something unexpected happened. Instead of sending a plea for mercy, Earth sent a message of its own. A single chilling transmission that echoed across the void of space. "We do not surrender. You have made a mistake." It was not a challenge. It was a declaration of war. The overlords were momentarily silent. In all their years of conquest, they had never heard those words from a newly contacted species. There was always resistance, but never defiance at this level. With a slow, deliberate motion, the lead overlord gestured toward the fleet commander. "Destroy one of their cities," he ordered coldly. Show them what happens to those who refuse to submit. As the Dominion warships adjusted their trajectory, preparing to launch an orbital strike, a sudden alert filled their screens. Their scanners, once clear, were now detecting multiple incoming vessels. At first, the overlords dismissed it as a malfunction, until the ships emerged from the darkness. Sleek, angular warships with glowing blue thrusters, moving in precise formations. Human warships. But how? The overlords had believed Earth to be a planet still in its infancy when it came to space combat. Yet here they were, not only in space, but in formation, armed and ready. The Dominion ships hesitated for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, humanity struck first. The opening volley was unlike anything the overlords had anticipated. Instead of crude nuclear warheads or slow-moving missiles, Earth's ships unleashed high-velocity railgun slugs, tearing through the Dominion's shielding with brutal efficiency. The first enemy cruiser shattered into burning debris before it could even return fire. The second, attempting to maneuver out of range, was caught by an experimental plasma lance, slicing it clean in half. Panic rippled through the Dominion ranks. This was not a rebellion, it was a trap. As the battle unfolded above Earth, the overlords on the command ship finally understood their miscalculation. Humanity was not an easy conquest. It was not a species that simply gave up in the face of superior power. No, humans were something far worse. They were unpredictable. They did not fight like other civilizations. They adapted, learned, and turned their weaknesses into strengths. And now, with their first victory against the Dominion, a new realization dawned upon the overlords, a terrifying one. This war was not going to be as easy as they had assumed. Far below, on the surface of Earth, billions of people watched the skies as streaks of fire rained down. Some were falling wreckage from Dominion ships, others the triumphant return of human warships. For the first time since the ultimatum had been given, fear was replaced by something else: hope. Humanity had drawn its line in the sand, and the overlords had been forced to take a step back. But this was only the beginning. The battle for Earth had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The wreckage of the first battle still floated in Earth's orbit, a silent reminder that humanity had done the impossible. It had survived its first engagement with the overlords. But survival was not enough. The overlords, humiliated by their unexpected losses, would return with greater force. Their empire spanned thousands of star systems, their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, and their technology had dominated the galaxy for centuries. To them, Earth was a primitive outlier that should never have been capable of resistance. And yet, here humanity stood, defiant. But defiance alone would not win the war. Earth needed to show its true power, and the time had come to do just that. In the depths of space, hidden beyond the reach of standard Dominion sensors, lay humanity's greatest secret, the Aegis fleet. For decades, unknown to the rest of the world, the brightest minds on Earth had been working in classified facilities, building warships that could stand against interstellar empires. While the overlords had assumed Earth was barely capable of spaceflight, humanity had, in secret, mastered the art of war among the stars. Using reverse-engineered alien technology from past encounters, along with human ingenuity, Earth had constructed a fleet designed not just to defend but to dominate. Now, with the overlords regrouping for a second attack, the time for secrecy was over. On the bridge of the UNS Leviathan, the pride of Earth's fleet, Admiral Ethan Graves watched the tactical display. Reports from Earth's intelligence network suggested that the Dominion had already begun assembling a much larger force. This time, they would not send only a handful of ships. They would send an armada, overwhelming in size and firepower. If Earth was to stand a chance, the Aegis fleet had to move first. "We make the next strike," Graves said, his voice cold with determination. His officers exchanged glances, knowing what this meant. They were about to take the fight directly to the Dominion. No species had ever dared to do such a thing. But then again, no species was like humanity. As the order was given, Earth's hidden warships emerged from the darkness. The fleet was unlike anything ever seen before. Sleek, angular vessels, built with advanced armor plating and equipped with cutting-edge weaponry, moved into formation. Unlike Dominion ships, which relied on sheer size and numbers, human warships were built for adaptability. They carried railguns capable of firing projectiles at near-light speeds, energy-based weaponry that could rip through shields, and AI-assisted targeting systems that ensured every shot found its mark. But perhaps their greatest advantage was the experimental energy shielding, a breakthrough that put them on equal footing with the Dominion. If Earth was to win this war, it had to do more than just resist. It had to prove that humans were a force to be feared. As the fleet accelerated toward the Dominion's staging ground, deep in the void between solar systems, the overlords remained unaware. Their arrogance blinded them. They still believed Earth to be scrambling, struggling to prepare for an inevitable invasion. But that assumption was shattered the moment human warships dropped out of FTL travel and launched their first attack. The Dominion outpost, a massive battle station surrounded by heavily armed warships, never had a chance to react. Within seconds, the first salvo of railgun rounds tore through its defenses, shattering its outer hull like glass. Plasma lances cut through Dominion cruisers before they could even raise their shields. AI-assisted drones swarmed the battlefield, overwhelming enemy ships with precision strikes. For the first time in history, the Dominion knew what it felt like to be hunted. Aboard their command ship, High Lord Vexor watched in horror as human warships obliterated his fleet. This was impossible. No primitive species should have been capable of this level of warfare. And yet, ship after ship, Dominion vessels fell, reduced to burning wreckage. The humans were not just attacking. They were outmaneuvering, outthinking, and outgunning the Dominion in ways that should not have been possible. With every passing moment, the battle turned further in Earth's favor. This was not just a defensive skirmish. This was a declaration. Humanity had entered the war, and it was winning. As the last of the Dominion ships attempted to flee, the UNS Leviathan moved in for the final blow. Its primary cannon, an experimental energy weapon capable of firing concentrated plasma at unparalleled velocity, locked onto the Dominion command ship. A moment later, a beam of searing white light erupted from the Leviathan's hull, punching through the Dominion flagship in a single devastating blast. In an instant, the Overlord's command vessel was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting debris. The remaining enemy forces, realizing the battle was lost, scattered into deep space, desperate to escape. The humans did not pursue. They had done what they came to do. The Dominion was no longer untouchable. Back on Earth, the world watched in awe as the news spread. Humanity had not just survived the Overlord's first attack, it had countered with overwhelming force. The galaxy had always known the Dominion to be invincible, a power beyond challenge. But now, for the first time, cracks had formed in that illusion. Across alien worlds, species that had lived under the Dominion's rule for centuries began to whisper of rebellion. If Earth, a so-called primitive world, could stand against the Overlords, what else was possible? But with victory came new dangers. The Overlords would not accept this humiliation. The Dominion had never lost a battle like this before. Even now, in their distant homeworld, war councils were forming, strategies being rewritten. They would return, and this time, they would not hold back. But humanity had sent its message loud and clear. Earth was not weak. Earth would not surrender. And Earth was ready for war. The galaxy had changed forever. And the real battle was only just beginning. The galaxy had always known one truth. The Dominion was unstoppable. For centuries, they had ruled with absolute power, crushing rebellions before they could even begin, eliminating threats before they could grow. No species had ever dared to challenge them, for the consequences were absolute annihilation. But today, the unthinkable had happened. Humanity had declared war. And what was even more shocking, the Dominion was losing. In the vastness of space, near the shattered remains of a Dominion-controlled system, the final battle had begun. The Overlords had assembled a fleet unlike any seen before. Thousands of warships, each one bristling with weapons, shields powerful enough to withstand planetary bombardments, and crews trained for nothing but destruction. This was not just an attack. It was a statement. The Dominion would not allow a primitive race like humanity to humiliate them. Earth's defiance had to be crushed, and this battle was meant to be a warning to any other species who might consider rising against their rule. But what the Overlords had failed to understand was that humanity was unlike any enemy they had faced before. They did not fight for power or conquest. They fought because they refused to bow. On the bridge of the USS Titan, Admiral Ethan Graves stood with unwavering focus, his gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. The enemy fleet stretched across the void like a vast, impenetrable wall of death. Any rational commander would have seen the sheer size of the Dominion's forces and surrendered. But Graves was not a man who surrendered. "All ships, prepare for combat." His voice rang through the fleet, steady and calm. This was it, the battle that would decide the fate of humanity. There was no turning back. The first Dominion warships moved forward, unleashing a storm of plasma fire that illuminated the darkness of space like the birth of a new star. The human fleet, smaller but more agile, broke formation in a coordinated pattern, dodging the initial barrage while returning fire with pinpoint precision. Railguns thundered, sending hyper-accelerated projectiles tearing through Dominion shields, while experimental energy cannons unleashed beams of concentrated destruction. Within seconds, the first Dominion battleships erupted into fire, their armor torn apart by the sheer ferocity of the attack. The Overlords had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves locked in a war unlike anything they had ever faced. As the battle raged on, Dominion commanders scrambled to adapt. Their numbers should have been enough to overwhelm any enemy, but the humans fought differently. Their warships were not just weapons. They were predators, moving in coordinated packs, striking at weak points with ruthless efficiency. AI-controlled drones swarmed enemy vessels, exploiting openings before Dominion crews could react. Unlike the Overlords, who relied on brute force, humanity had turned the battle into a deadly game of strategy and precision. Every Dominion ship that fell sent a ripple of fear through their ranks. This was not a desperate defense. This was an onslaught. From the heart of the Dominion fleet, Supreme Commander Vexor watched in horror as his forces collapsed under the relentless assault. It was impossible. The humans should have been outmatched, outgunned, outnumbered. And yet, they were winning. "Focus fire on their command ships," he barked, desperate to regain control. The Dominion warships adjusted their tactics, targeting Earth's most powerful vessels. The USS Titan shook violently as a barrage of enemy fire slammed into its hull, its shields struggling to hold. Damage reports flooded the screens, but Graves did not waver. "Hold the line," he commanded, his voice like iron. "We will not break." The battle stretched on for hours, the void of space filled with the wreckage of fallen ships. Both sides suffered losses, but it was the Dominion that bled the most. The Overlords had never known true war before. They had only known conquest, swift, merciless, and one-sided. But against humanity, there was no surrender, no submission. Every human ship destroyed was avenged tenfold. Every fallen soldier was a martyr for Earth. Then, the turning point came. A squadron of human stealth bombers, cloaked by advanced electromagnetic disruptors, broke through the Dominion's defenses and struck their flagship. Explosions rippled across its surface, tearing apart its command decks in a chain reaction of destruction. Supreme Commander Vexor barely had time to register what was happening before his ship was engulfed in a massive fireball. The moment his flagship was obliterated, the Dominion fleet hesitated. It was only for a second, but in war, a second was all it took. Now, Graves roared, and the human fleet surged forward. Seizing the moment, Dominion warships, leaderless and panicked, faltered under the unrelenting assault. The battle had already been brutal, but now it became a slaughter. One by one, the Overlord's warships fell, consumed by fire, shattered by railgun rounds, annihilated by energy lances. The once invincible Dominion armada was no longer an unstoppable force. It was a graveyard. And then, it was over. The last remaining Dominion ships turned and fled, abandoning their fallen comrades. The humans did not chase them. They had done what they came to do. The Dominion was broken. For the first time in history, an empire that had ruled unchallenged for millennia had been defeated in open battle. The galaxy would never be the same again. As the wreckage of the battlefield drifted through space, carrying the silent echoes of war, the message was clear. Humanity was here to stay. Across the stars, oppressed species who had lived in fear of the Dominion now saw a new future. If Earth could fight back, so could they. Rebellions that had once seemed impossible now sparked in the hearts of countless worlds. The Overlords, once the gods of the galaxy, now found themselves facing a terrifying reality. The age of Dominion supremacy was over, and the era of human defiance had begun. The galaxy had never witnessed such a moment. The Dominion, rulers of countless worlds, had been defeated. Their mighty fleets, once feared across the stars, had been reduced to wreckage, scattered across the void. The battle that was meant to crush humanity had instead shattered the Dominion's illusion of invincibility. Across the Empire, whispers of rebellion had begun. The Overlords, once seen as gods, now looked vulnerable. And in their desperation, they knew, if they did not act swiftly, their rule would come to an end. From the dark chambers of the Dominion's War Council, Supreme Overlord Sci-Fi watched the holographic projections of their shattered fleets. The losses were unthinkable. The humans had done what no species had ever dared. They had not only fought but won. Sci-Fi's advisors stood in silence, their faces filled with fear. No one spoke because no one had answers. The Dominion had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, crushing any opposition with sheer numbers and firepower. And yet, humanity had torn through their fleets like a force of nature. The question that haunted them all was simple: how? We underestimated them. Commander Vorth finally spoke, his voice heavy with tension. They do not fight like the others. They adapt. They think. They refuse to break, even in the face of certain death. His words echoed in the silent chamber. The Overlords had ruled for so long through fear. They had never needed to understand their enemies, only to destroy them. But humanity had changed everything. Sci-Fi's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. His mind raced through the possibilities. The Dominion was vast, its armies still powerful. But the loss of their greatest fleet had crippled their dominance. More than that, it had shattered their aura of absolute control. The lesser species, once cowed into submission, would see this as a sign of weakness. He could already imagine them plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to rise against their overlords. That could not be allowed. The Dominion had ruled for 10,000 years. It would not fall to a single species. Prepare the Omega Protocol, Sci-Fi commanded. A hush fell over the room. The Omega Protocol was something never used before. It was a last resort, a weapon of pure desperation, one that would ensure humanity's destruction, no matter the cost. His advisors hesitated. But Supreme Overlord, one of them dared to say, "If we use it, we may. If we do nothing, we will lose everything." Sci-Fi cut him off, his voice cold and merciless. "We must remind the galaxy why we are feared. We will break humanity, not just their fleets, but their spirit. They must understand that defying the Dominion means annihilation." Across the Dominion, the plan was set into motion. Fleets were pulled back from distant territories, regrouping for a final strike. The Overlords issued orders with ruthless efficiency. Entire planets were stripped of their resources, factories churned out war machines at a terrifying speed, and genetic laboratories were pushed to their limits, creating monstrous bioweapons designed for one purpose: to exterminate humanity. Every scientist, every soldier, every asset was now dedicated to one goal: erasing Earth from existence. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity was preparing for the inevitable. They knew the Dominion would not accept defeat. The Overlords would come back, stronger and more ruthless than before. Admiral Ethan Graves stood at the command center of the U.S. Titan, watching reports flood in from across human space. The battle had been a victory, but the war was far from over. "They are planning something," he muttered to himself. "Something worse than anything we've seen." His instincts were rarely wrong. The Overlords were not the type to accept humiliation. They would strike back harder than ever. And then, the first attack came. It was unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. A colony on the outer rim, Ganymede Prime, vanished. There were no distress calls, no sensor readings, no sign of battle. One moment, the colony was there. The next, it was gone. An entire planet, wiped from existence in an instant. The Dominion had unleashed a new weapon. And it was only the beginning. The galaxy watched in horror as the Overlords escalated their war. Dozens of human colonies were targeted. Cities burned. Entire populations were erased overnight. It was not war. It was genocide. The Overlords were not trying to conquer humanity anymore. They were trying to erase them, to make sure no trace of their existence remained. But they had once again made a fatal mistake. They believed that by attacking humanity's worlds, they would break their spirit. What they failed to understand was that every act of destruction only made humanity more determined. They were not fighting for power. They were fighting for survival. And when humanity fought for survival, they became unstoppable. In response to the atrocities, Earth unleashed its full might. No longer just fighting for their freedom, they were now fighting for the survival of their entire race. New weapons, designed in secrecy, were brought to the battlefield. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen took to the stars. And at the heart of it all, humanity's unbreakable will burn brighter than ever. As the final battle loomed, one thing became clear: the Overlords had thought their desperation would bring them victory. Instead, it had sealed their fate. The war that had begun as an attempt to force humanity into submission had now become something much greater. It was no longer just a war for power. It was a war that would decide the future of the entire galaxy. The war was over. The Dominion, the once mighty rulers of the galaxy, had fallen. Their fleets lay in ruins, their planets stripped of power, and their Overlords either dead or in hiding. The galaxy that had once trembled at their name was now witnessing something unthinkable, a new ruler emerging from the ashes. Humanity, the species that was supposed to surrender, had not only survived, but had won. And now, the question remained: what came next? Across the shattered remains of the Dominion's core worlds, human warships loomed like silent watchers. The UNS Titan, the pride of Earth's fleet, drifted in orbit over Xyphos Prime, the former throne world of the Overlords. From the command deck, Admiral Ethan Graves surveyed the destruction below. The once glistening capital of the Dominion was in ruins. Fires still burned in the lower levels, and the skies were filled with the wreckage of warships that had tried, and failed, to stop humanity's advance. It was a sight no one in the galaxy had ever expected. The Overlords had ruled for 10,000 years. And now, in a matter of months, their empire had collapsed. But victory did not mean peace. The galaxy was on the brink of chaos. Without the Dominion's iron rule, dozens of species that had been forced into servitude were now rising up. Some wanted revenge, others wanted freedom, and many saw this moment as an opportunity to carve out their own kingdoms. The Dominion had been harsh, but it had also maintained order. Now, with its destruction, the galaxy stood on the edge of anarchy. Ethan turned to his officers. "We didn't fight this war just to watch everything fall apart," he said. "If we leave now, another empire will rise to take the Dominion's place. And this time, it might be worse." He wasn't wrong. Across the galaxy, warlords were already fighting for control. Old enemies of the Dominion were gathering their forces, and without leadership, the fragile balance of power would soon descend into endless bloodshed. Humanity had won the war, but now they had to decide what to do with their victory. Back on Earth, leaders debated the future. Some wanted to withdraw from galactic affairs, to let the aliens fight among themselves while humanity rebuilt. But others saw a different future, one where humanity didn't just retreat, but led. The galaxy is broken. President Elizabeth Carter addressed the United Earth Council. For centuries, species have lived in fear, ruled by tyrants. We have a choice. We can turn our backs on them, or we can build something better. A future where no species has to suffer under oppression again. It was a bold vision. A human-led galactic order, not built on fear, but on strength and unity. Not an empire, but a federation. One where every species had a voice. But not everyone agreed. Some argued that Earth had already sacrificed enough, that humanity had no obligation to fix the galaxy's problems. Others feared that if humans didn't take control, someone else would. As these debates raged, the remnants of the Dominion were making their last move. Scattered warlords, former overlords, and loyalists who refused to accept defeat had begun rallying their forces in the shadowy edges of the galaxy. They called themselves the True Dominion. Their goal was clear: revenge. And their first target, the newly formed human coalition. The attack came without warning. A fleet of Dominion loyalists struck the human-controlled worlds with a desperation-fueled fury. Planets that had barely begun rebuilding were once again thrown into war. Civilians were massacred, cities reduced to rubble. The message was clear. The overlords might have lost, but they were not finished. But humanity had changed. This was no longer a species fighting for survival. Now, they were fighting for order. The response was swift and brutal. Human warships, now reinforced with allies who had once been slaves to the Dominion, struck back with unmatched precision. The True Dominion had expected humanity to be weakened after the war. Instead, they faced an enemy that was stronger than ever. The final battle took place on a barren world deep in Dominion space. The last of the overlords, the ones who had once ruled over billions with an iron fist, made their final stand. But there was no mercy, no negotiations, no surrender. Humanity had already given them their chance to walk away. They had chosen war. And so, war was what they received. When the dust settled, the last remnant of the Dominion was gone. The overlords were no more, and the galaxy was truly free. But freedom was only the beginning. As humanity stood victorious, the question remained: what kind of future would they create? The old ways were gone. The Dominion had ruled through fear, but humanity had a chance to build something new. And so, with the fall of the last overlord, a new message was sent across the stars. This is Admiral Ethan Graves of the United Earth Fleet. The war is over. The Dominion is no more. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, and we will not turn our backs on it. We extend our hand, not as conquerors, but as builders of a new future. A future where strength is not used to oppress, but to protect. Where no species will live in fear of annihilation. This is humanity's promise. A new age begins today. Together, we will build a new galactic order. Across the stars, millions listened. Some were skeptical, others were hopeful. But one thing was certain: the era of the overlords was gone, and in its place, humanity had risen. A new order had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again.